Welcome to another set review of MSEM. This time we're reviewing Road to Caru Mapu, or Mapu. Wait, I apologize. Pronunciation.
Don't worry, we already asked how to pronounce this thing, and we're not going to pronounce it correctly because turns out pronouncing things correctly is hard, even if you know how to pronounce it.
We'll try. We'll make an attempt. This is better than Panshao, where you knew how to pronounce stuff and I didn't.
Yeah.
But this is I don't set from Gunner Poet.
Yep.
Lots of interesting cards. Not super familiar with the lore, which maybe wouldn't surprise people. So I think it's probably just best to jump straight into the cards.
So first up, we have Kalfu, right? It's pronounced Kalfu, right? Kalfu, greatest Toki. If it's wrong, you post later, Giant Poet. It's also conveniently the first has the first set code because it's a colorless card, despite being all colors.
The colorless card, yeah.
Yeah.
So works with domain +2/+1 Anthem and Vigilance, and also has a death trigger to fetch a 4-mana artifact, Heart of Caru Mapu, and
artifact.
Grabs you a bunch.
Yeah, the artifact taps for domain. So I actually did play a deck with this card, and it's a really crazy deck because it's trying to run domain, but you're also trying to run Primal Resurgence. Let me actually just load up this deck to show you what it looks like.
Yeah, so turns out domain is not super hard to get, especially if you're playing a bunch of lands and a bunch of ramp in general. You see this with stuff like Burning Up as another MSEM example. But even in canon, getting a domain on like 3 lands is relatively doable, just because it's fetchable, 2 lands or tri-lands.
Fetchable tri-lands. This deck is also running Primal Resurgence, which is kind of funny because like you're trying to run Primal Resurgence in a deck that has like only 1 fetchable basic of each type, but apparently the mana in MSEM is good enough for that to work out. So
yeah.
And the thing with Toki is that it's probably the most efficient Anthem that you can get in this sort of deck, where you're not really going all in on playing a bunch of tokens or going all in on playing an aggro deck that tries to swarm the board and Anthem up your board. And the main reason you're running Kalfu is that it combos really well with Grade. So basically, Grade, when it enters battlefield, will make X 1/1 hasty squirrels, and then she buffs them by 1 power, and then Kalfu buffs them by 2 more power, and then now you can just one-shot your opponent out of nowhere.
Yeah, and especially with Toki fetching a huge ramp piece makes that X on Grade potentially huge. Also works with, of course, any other X spells, works with all the typical ramp payoffs you'd expect. So, of course, you have Offie, all the Coalesce stuff. Does put the Heart straight in play, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and if you have, and like you're fine with playing Toki just out on its own. Because, like, if you play out Toki early, it's a 3/4. If it dies, then you're really happy, so your opponent's kind of reluctant to kill it. But once you get Domain, then suddenly, like, it becomes extremely scary because you might just play Great and one-shot them out of nowhere. So they're kind of forced to at least deal with it. And then if it gets dealt with, then now you have Heart of Caru Mapu tapping for million mana, helping your other X spells.
Yeah, mainly it's definitely not flawless working this tough plan because it is a die trigger, not leave trigger.
Yeah.
So if one has extra removal or bounce, you're really in the kind of the dumps because really investing 4 mana into a card that, at least in this situation, isn't going to be doing anything immediately with the Anthem, even if you have the Anthem active already, is really rough.
Yeah.
You could also maybe look at it in more like aggressive kind of styles of decks where you're looking to play the turn 4 with Domain active and swing on the same turn.
That is probably a lot harder because MSEM doesn't have much support for untapped Domain, right? Because you do need to play these tapped tri-lands in order to get Domain reliably. Or I guess in this deck, you're playing like Verdant Sanctuary in order to fetch all these off-color basics from your sideboard. So how easily can you get Domain naturally in the course of your aggro deck game plan?
I mean, you don't need to be full on aggressive. Like, I'm even just saying that, like, yeah, you can, maybe your curve is turn 3 Sanguine. Turn 3 Sanguine, get back a shock fetch, crack that shock fetch for a tri-land, untap Toki.
So that's pretty close to...
Not Toki. Why am I calling him Toki? Kalfu.
Greatest Toki. Not just some random Toki. It's the greatest Toki.
Yeah, you might be able to very, very unfamiliar with these words. And then swing with a Sangjin, swing with 5, Sangjin's still back to block. And then have some, like, you have RV or you have some other high-end expensive thing. Grade maybe isn't as doable in the style of deck, just because Grade doesn't have land types. So if getting domain is an issue, then playing multiple Grade is kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
But even just like stuff like not pronounce it Ramsey,
Yeah.
pronounce it Ramsey, same difference. Giving you tokens, ramping you up. These cards all work together reasonably well. So definitely something to look at. But that kind of how do you get this to be like? There's a certain amount of like working around this card that you need to do. I forget if your deck ran Children of Clouds.
Well, it did, but I feel like it never really pulled its weight.
Yeah, but end up turning Children of Clouds on tap, Kalfu. That's another really powerful threat. But then again, maybe it's just one more at that point. Maybe you do just want some fat creature at the top of the curve that works by itself. Also, I will mention that Migrate actually shuts this card off.
Oh,
reasonably
right.
hard, which is funny.
Well, unless you're playing Verdant Sanctuary and fetching on your basics from the sideboard.
Yeah, because Migrate does shut off land types. But not too big of a concern, because of course it is just okay if you just play it and it dies and fetches hard, then you're pretty happy there. But maybe worth mentioning.
Yeah. Also, it's all colors for some random reason. So, like, if you have some way to abuse the fact that it's all colors, maybe it also works there.
Moving forward, we have Capac's Envoy, which kind of group huggy, though kind of in a hate bear kind of way.
Yeah.
Where 2-mana 2/3 ETB draw a card, though the trigger does make it so that everyone can draw a card. So not pure upside. But then of course the trigger will affect everyone. So if the opponent wants to play RFE, draw any amount of cards, play cantrips or whatnot, then this will let you draw off them too.
Yeah.
So there is admittedly not that many good just generic white 2-drops. So in that respect, then maybe Envoy has a place there. Where the cards I'm thinking of, where it's Lisa is very strong, but much more aggressive. Swan Cohort, not great in some matchups if you can't get it to die easily. Fox and Mushroom Forest is another one that has its matchups that are good, has its matchups where it's bad. Envoy seems to be another one of those cards where it's clearly has good matchups, and I think it clearly has bad matchups too, but generally is pretty solid overall. Do you kind of agree with that assessment, or do you think you should be jamming 4 of these? And
Yeah, I think I mostly just agree. Like, I don't really have too much strong thoughts about this card because, like, I can't really figure out where it'd be super great. Like, it's just really conditional. I guess you can try to abuse this card by playing cards that make every player draw, except that doesn't even help you, right? Because it's a replacement effect I'm not sure how the replacement effect works if there's a single effect that makes both players draw.
Imagine it double up, right? If one or more players would draw a card. So I imagine a trigger, if you had a fact that said each player draws a card, then it wouldn't do anything.
So like if you play Trade Route Bandit with this thing out, what would happen?
Then I think both players would have the option of drawing a single card twice.
You have the option now instead of being forced to draw 2 cards.
Yeah, having the option is important because otherwise it does just kill straight up with Fleshscale Serpent.
Didn't Fleshscale Serpent already get nerfed before that?
Yeah, even with the rules adjustment on Fleshscale, it still would kill if your opponent tapped out.
Right.
Because Fleshscale only triggers once per set of draws, but then it makes you draw again if your opponent doesn't pay. So that would trigger Envoy again. So it doesn't work in that way, which is good.
Is there like some random card that makes your opponent draw cards as a downside? I mean, like the Fiery Burst cycle got nerfed, right? So after that, I don't think there's anything super great that makes your opponent draw as a downside.
That's a good question. I don't think there is, or at least I don't think there's anything good enough to like point out. I think most cards would have both players draw a card, which this doesn't affect.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe a decent card, just solid 2-drop if your white decks are looking for 2 drops. but probably nothing to go super UA for.
Yep.
Um,
So moving on. What's our next card?
next we have Asuka Walla Vanguard.
Yeah, Chaska Walla Vanguard.
Hopefully that's correct. So growing lifelinker is generally a recipe for success. Is it recipe for success here though? Because a 1-mana 1/2 is definitely not a exciting starting stat line.
So you've brought up Hallowed Moon Sentinel as competition for this card.
Yeah, so Hall Moon Sentinel starts as 1/1, but instead of triggering on non-creature spells, it triggers on everything 2 CMC or less. So hits creatures 2 CMC or less, doesn't hit non-creatures 3 CMC or more.
I'm assuming Hallowed Moon Sentinel has a better trigger condition in general, because in the decks you're playing these things in, you're not going to be running expensive spells.
Yeah, I imagine so. Maybe there's an argument that you can, because you have both, you can like just play both. And just play them as the only creatures in your deck.
So you're just playing some sort of tempo deck where you're playing these guys that grow, and then you try to play a bunch of spells to protect them and buff them.
Yeah, just play a bunch of cantrips and whatnot. A blue-white or something along those lines.
I mean, since these guys have lifelink, you wreck burn super hard.
Yeah, that is only if you can actually get them above burn range, which would take 2 triggers in the Vanguard's case, 3 in the Sentinel's case.
I mean, yeah, but like that's a problem that every tempo deck faces, right? And with these creatures, you're even better against burn than normal tempo decks.
Yeah, like if you can get these off the ground, then your opponent's going to need a kill spell to deal with them. They can't exactly race them, but used to have all the problems of these kind of setup creatures where it's like, yeah, they do die to removal, and they do need setup, and especially on the draw, they end up being quite slow.
They're not 1-drops. That's a problem, right?
Yeah, they're not 1-drops and they don't have an immediate effect. They're not self-sufficient. They're not good top decks. Are kind of the main arguments against them. But not spend too long on Vanguard. We have Defender of Caru Mapu, which is a Dredge-esque card. Though I guess Dredge has kind of lost all meaning at this point. It's a graveyard synergy piece.
Yeah.
So, casting spells in graveyard, how do you do that?
Flashback, right?
Any particular flashback spells you're thinking of?
Are there any super cheap flashback spells?
Yeah, so the cheapest is probably through the Ashen Gates. That is especially cheap. 0 mana to get in your graveyard and only 1 mana flashback. There's stuff like Enraptured Countess, which gives flashback. A few other things like from Ancient Tomes, which gives flashback. It is a bit hard to search for things that cast from grave. Tenuous Existence is in color, which is nice.
But I don't think you want Tenuous Existence while you're playing this card, right?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not the worst. You can still target opponent stuff.
Well, yeah, but like if you use the Tenuous Existence's second mode, this thing just goes bye-bye.
It is always hard to remember what cast from graves. King Dancer does cast from grave.
Wait,
and does also yes.
So that also
means
the
person that's exiled.
Huh.
But I believe Breach Lilies does not cast from grave, if I'm remembering correctly.
Let's see. It exiles it and then casts a copy.
Okay, now I'm second guessing myself with Enraptured Countess.
Oh wait. Well, I know Enraptured Countess used to get flashback. What's its wording now?
Countess no longer gives flashback; it just exiles it.
Oh, wait, why does it not give flashback?
Does not work. Okay, so King Dancer through the Ashen Gate are probably decent bets. Other condition, you need to attack, which is generally harder than you might expect.
Yeah, especially if you're spending the first turn trying to dump this thing into your yard.
Yeah, attacking is definitely harder than it looks a lot of times. This does enter untapped when it's attacking because it has vigilance. Well, I guess not because it has vigilance because wording, but so if you are like on the back foot, you can just suicide attack. If you have this triggered, get it back. You now have a 3/4 blocker, which is pretty nice.
Is that worth paying 2 mana for? Like, or is all that work worth going through just to pay 2 mana for a 3/4?
I mean, yeah, I mean 3/4 flyer is pretty well statted.
Yeah, but
3/4 vigilance flyers too.
Like, are you even getting that much of a discount on it if you're trying to get back the alternative way, because like first you have to discard it, and then you have to find some way to cast a spell from yard, and then you have to find some way to attack.
Yeah, but presumably you can get an upside on this card. So, say if you're playing this Cane Dancer, or just in blue in general, you can discard to like a Wheat from Chaff or something. So I guess the ideal might be that you go turn 1 Wheat from Chaff, discard this and through the Ashen Gate, turn 2 play some creature, turn 3 attack, get it back after flashing back through the Ashen Gate. That is a bit fantasy land, but that doesn't seem like a crazy thing. And of course, if it does die naturally, then you're pretty fine with that because you can just get back again.
This thing doesn't exile itself; it just goes infinite. Maybe it's supposed to be a value engine instead of just something you cheat out early.
And relevantly, a 4-mana 3/4 Vigilance Fly isn't that bad as just a play on turn 4 stat line. It's not good, but it's definitely not embarrassing if you need to go for plan B.
Yeah, so I mean, just play this in some sort of mid-rangey deck, and then take advantage of the fact that you can bring this thing back a bunch of times by just doing your normal game plan.
It's a bit difficult to build to like naturally run into a deck that wants this, I think. Because obviously stuff like Through the Ashen Gate, not the most normal card to play.
I mean, like you could just play this.
In white deck.
You could just play it in a Cane Dancer Temple deck, right? Or Cane Dancer mid-rangey deck.
Yeah, but like when I was suggesting Cane Dancer, it's like, well, okay, what Cane Dancer cards discard? Because there certainly are some, but I think most of the typical Cane Dancer targets don't discard.
Well, like you don't have to discard this. You just play this naturally as a 4-drop, and then you bring it back later, right? Is that too slow?
I think so. I think as a main game plan, that's probably too slow.
Right.
It's not the end of the world if it happens, but I think you do want to expect that 70+% of the time it's coming back from the graveyard first, and you don't have to cast it.
Right.
But moving on before I actually start going through all these Instigate searches and be like, oh yes, you have Virtuous Cadenza. That's a Cane Dancer target that discards it. And it has an Agonize you can cast from the graveyard. Huh. If I get too far down that route, or we can move on to Doubtful Authority, which is a bear that has an anthem.
And yeah, so it's a bear that has an anthem, and the downside is that your lands enter the battlefield tapped.
I think we can both agree that downside is relatively minimal. Maybe not quite as minimal as you might expect, with just because fetch lands really don't like this. But
just don't play a deck with fetch lands, right?
Sure, but or just play it on turn 4 or whatever after you out of lands in hand. But so the kind of the basic ideas here, you played an aggro deck. I think that's fine, right? It's just a cheap anthem. You play it like Gillo, kind of Gillo without all these setup conditions.
Without trample.
Weight is better.
I mean, well, unlike Gillo, it doesn't give trample, but it shouldn't matter too much.
Yeah, maybe it's pretty similar to Daisy in that regard, except
it is like Daisy.
Isn't a better color than Daisy, admittedly.
Is it?
For aggro, I think so. Yeah. Green definitely does have some amount of go wide tools, but I think white is generally more appreciative of anthems. Additionally, it does have some other nice properties with the creature types. So there's a cleric for cleric tribal, though I mean, like how much cleric tribal cares about clerics is really debatable.
They care more about life gain than clerics, right?
Yeah, they do have some amount of cleric tribal cards.
They have Carnival Yattery and Reflected or Reflection.
Let me see if I can find it. Protective Memory.
Oh, yeah, Protective Memory.
Also the Fairdo's Anointed, which is the new Source Juster. That's another cleric tribal card. So there's like decent amount of cleric tribal in there.
Yeah, but like
this being cleric is nice.
If you're gonna be playing all these lords anyways, I don't think you need to play a general anthem guy.
Yep. But figure I might mention it. Maybe the more interesting creature type is actually human. Which is kind of funny because obviously like human tribal is not super big in MSEM, but this does give humans a lord of sorts, which it doesn't have in MSEM.
I mean, it gives every creature type a lord of sorts, right?
Yeah, but the key thing is that you can cast it off of the tribal lands. So you can play 5-color humans and have a lord.
Right.
So maybe that's something worth looking at. It's probably definitely not as strong as, say, as like dedicated creature lords. So like the legendary lord, for example. That's a Savannah lines, which is always better stat line.
Yeah.
But maybe worth it in just to get a Anthem if you are going through that lines, or just in a general aggro deck or aggressive deck that wants a toddy target or something along those lines.
Yeah.
It doesn't have an easy Anthem available.
So you mean like Oxfox? I mean, Oxfox is always looking for more anthems, right?
Yeah, Oxfox maybe appreciates this card.
I mean, the thing is, the tap land actually does matter a bit because you have Chronicles of the Kitsune, which requires mana.
Yeah, and Oxfox does play a Verdict and, as you mentioned, Chronicles as anthems.
Like,
So it's not as critical there.
I might just appreciate having more anthems in general.
Yeah, definitely.
And also Creature Vomit. Like, maybe this will bring back Creature Vomit after... I'm pretty sure half the deck has been nerfed by now, because, like, even after people stopped playing that deck, like, Correlite Champion got nerfed due to Oxfox, and then...
Yeah, Correlite Champion got a designer nerf.
Due to Oxfox.
Yeah, sure, if you're gonna do like that. Chronicles got hit for other reasons, but Oxfox is still a good deck. Moving on to another card, we have Eloy, Martyrized Tyrant. So I did play this deck, Eloy, a little bit in Mono White Polyp. So I figured that new white 5-drop creature, you play it with the Mono White deck that ramps. And that deck did play a lot of basics, or could play a lot of basics rather. So the ETB isn't as punishing, because you obviously want basics if this punishes non-basics. And I will say it was okay there. It was definitely a very game-warping card, but I think it's probably would be better in a more controlling shell in general.
I remember playing against this card. I'm not exactly... I don't think I was playing a deck that was super affected by this card, so I didn't really see what it did, but I can easily imagine it completely screwing over some deck.
Yeah, I think if you're able to play blue-white control, for example, and play a lot of basics, where to the point that even though you probably have more lands than your opponent, you're less affected by this preventing untaps than opponent does, because of course you probably don't have many permanents you care about untapping, whereas your opponent probably has creatures they care about untapping.
Yeah, like they can't even play around this because it taps on ETB.
Yeah. Yeah, so even Sorcery Speed removal, gonna give you a turn, and does have the nice dice trigger, so gain 5 life, kills control decks. Do appreciate that. So it is a very impactful 5-drop. It doesn't win the game terribly fast, so that's definitely a downside compared to something else like Seto-san, which does win the game incredibly fast. But Seto-san doesn't nearly do as much in controlling the board as Eloy does.
Yeah.
It's also potentially a good sideboard card, just because there are some decks that play no basics, and well, suddenly this kills them, and they'd be very sad. Most decks do play basics, but some decks like their non-basics, like their greedy mana bases or their real lines and whatnot, and this does do a ridiculous amount against them. Moving on to another white card, we have Polytheism, which is a big cheat target. So 9 mana, not the mana cost matters, mind you. You reanimate 4 permanents, relevantly permanents, not non-land or creatures or anything, just permanents, and become 4/4 gods that with indestructible.
Yeah, I mean it's a big enchantment that does things.
Yeah, so I think the immediate thing here is Choi, which is the kind of enchantment cheat planeswalker, where you hopefully discard Polytheism turn 1 off Wheat from Chaff, whatever, play another enchantment turn 2, turn 3 Choi, get back Polytheism reanimates the enchantment you sacked Choi, reanimates any fetch lands as well, and hopefully that's good enough to win. That's kind of on the face of it.
Are you going to have enough targets in your yard if you do it on turn 3?
Well, you have the thing you sacked to Choi. If you're playing Wheat from Chaff on turn 1, you can discard something alongside it. You probably have a fetch land or 2. So I think you're probably getting at least 3 targets, if not all 4.
Okay, and if the thing you discarded is good enough on its own, then maybe it's just like... Actually, wait, can you reanimate curses with this thing, or does that not work well?
I think you still control the curse, I believe.
Yeah, but can you stick it onto your opponent because it's a creature?
That's what happens. I believe it unattaches, because I think in general, if ores unattached, if ores become creatures, they unattach.
Okay. So
I guess I can check real fast.
I guess you can't really play this with an inexorable epidemic because it would be like anti-synergy. Or maybe you can anyways, like just have backup reanimation target, and if you only get a 4/4 out of it, then that's fine.
I think the curse doesn't work, but I think it still stays on the battlefield
Yeah.
because they just become creatures, they're not auras.
Yeah.
So
So just
I think
you just have some random 4/4 lying around, which you're fine with, I guess.
yeah. Additionally, it doesn't strip the permanence of abilities, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So if you have another fatty thing to reanimate, this also reanimates them. So you have an Azos in graveyard, then now you get an Azos ETB.
Why are you playing Azos in your enchantment reanimation deck?
Yeah, I mean you can play other enchantment stuff.
Like Inexorable Epidemic.
Yeah, though as I mentioned, we don't think that works so much. Or at least not off polytheism. But I think this is like pretty reasonable. Even just getting 3/4/4s if you're doing it on turn 3. Well, I mean that's pretty good. I mean that's crashing rhinos.
Yeah.
Even better because they have indestructible. Critique Suchiai. There are some other big cheat targets in the set, but I think this one's probably the best one. So moving on, we have Colo Colo, which has some interesting mechanic with the inspiration mechanic, turning something else into Colo Colo.
Yeah.
But I think relevantly, it's just like kind of a one-mana Invisible Stalker with War 2 instead of Hexproof.
And then they can turn other things into more Colos.
Yeah, so even if we just ignore that can turn other things into Colo. How good is just like 1 mana can't be blocked Wood 2? Is that enough to start loading up your Ethereal Armors and your all that glitters into your league decks?
I think it's like close enough to a Boggles for you to do that. So like assuming your opponent's running a Alibi experience, they can't answer this thing until turn 3. So you have 2 turns to whack your opponent down. Or no, it's 1 turn because this thing you have to play on turn 1.
Yeah, a million multiples. It does like stack the Wood, so you get 2 Ward 2s.
Wait, no. Oh yeah, it works. Huh. It also stacks that can't be blocked.
It doesn't work if you turn something else into Colo, but if you just draw multiples, it does work. I don't know if there's that many other great options for Boggles. In general, I think this is far and away the best, having both evasion and hexproof.
Isn't there the sheep?
Whereas the sheep doesn't have inconspicuous sheep doesn't have evasion and doesn't work with stuff like Ethereal Armor because cost reduction isn't useful there. But as far as hexproof goes, you're looking at Tranquil Static. Well, I guess Xenan Skytrotter is your other Boggle in this theoretical deck.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an option. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I think most people are familiar with Invisible Stalker and what it does, but
I think we're mostly talking about it because it's funny, like Colo, right?
Sure. I mean, it's also a cute cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at those big eyes.
If someone manages to make a good deck with this card, then that's great because now we get to see more cute cats in the format.
But moving on, we have Afflicting Records.
It's a 6-mana Factor Fiction or a graveyard Factor Fiction.
Yeah. So instant speed draw is always, of course, what Control X would like. Just EOT, play draw on your end step, untap, have everything. This is an efficient draw. I think the main thing it's competing with is what's the Wanderlust draw spell?
Worlds Away. It is Worlds Away, right?
Yeah,
name drop or set name drop. Worlds Away.
So that's a 5-mana draw for instant speed. Basically, an instant speed. It's probably always going to have flash and constructed. How does this compare to Worlds Away?
It's 6 mana and you have to stock your graveyard.
Is it not enough to just do that naturally? Just stock a graveyard by playing gods?
I mean, if you're playing Cane Dancer, that thing eats away your graveyard.
Yeah, so what if you just didn't play Cane Dancer?
Okay, so you're playing a Cane Dancer-less control deck, which makes sense.
Yes. I think at this point, Cane Dancer is definitely not mandatory for Control X. You have enough good tools that Cane Dancer is optional.
Okay, so you just have to hope their opponent doesn't play Grave Hate.
Well, if they're playing Grave Hate for your 1 6-mana spell, I feel like you're okay with that.
You're only running 1 copy of this?
Well, 1, 2. I mean, you definitely don't want more than 2. You just kind of, I'm thinking you just play this as a, hey, yeah, this is getting a late game. I don't want to flood out. Here's my panic button. I draw infinite kind of card.
I guess you're probably casting this with like a 6-card graveyard, or I mean 6 things in the graveyard.
Yeah.
So then you get to play Fact or Fiction with your opponent. So that's going to cause some delays because people are usually tank super hard when they have to Fact or Fiction.
Yes. Yeah, I don't want to imagine how you split the piles on this if you're splitting 10 cards.
Yeah.
It is non-creature, non-land. So non-creature, another point against Cane Dancer here. Non-land is unfortunate, but what can you do? But if we take 6 as a metric, that chances are you have 6 spells cast by the time you're playing this. How good is that? Because it is Fact or Fiction, but it is spells. It is.
Well, the thing is, I'm not very good with Fact or Fiction because, well, first of all, I never played with that card in actual Magic. I haven't played it in Constructed. Well, actually, no, I haven't played Canon Constructed in basically ever, so never mind. But I have played Star Jump, both on the playing side and the receiving side, and I've never really liked that card because with Star Jump, or I should probably pull up what Star Jump does. But with Star Jump, the piles usually just feel really bad because you never get to free cast something that you want. I guess this isn't
but
Star
Jump. Yeah, I feel like Star Jump is mostly bad because of the lands, right?
Yeah. So with conflicting records, it's probably good.
Is it better than World's Away, do you think? Or is World's Away being full mana cheaper?
I think World's Away is better, and hardly anyone runs World's Away anyways, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I think in this format, control decks just don't need these sorts of cards. They'd rather play some sort of big fat planeswalker.
Yeah, that's fair. Unfortunately, we don't have a big fat planeswalker to move to, but
we have if we reward everything. But sure.
Moving on, we have Cosmic Expansion, which is a road. So that's a subtype introduced in the set, which kind of like the journeys from the Jedi sets. I think they're in multiple. Draw on the EB, choose a card name, and then the name you choose gets some kind of benefit. So here, whenever the thing you named deals damage to a player, you copy another artifact or enchantment you draw.
Yeah.
So what hypothetically if the creature you name is already an artifact or enchantment?
Ah, I see. Well, the first problem is that it's 3 mana, and you have to name a single creature. So it's basically an aura that costs 3 mana.
Yeah, but I mean, draws a card, so it's not really an aura, right? I mean, it doesn't have the same issues as auras, rather.
Yeah, something I want to mention about the roads. I've looked through all the roads, and most of them look pretty underwhelming to me. They all feel overcosted for what they do. But maybe I'm just undervaluing the cantrip way too much.
Yeah, I do think in general, just the fact that these cantrip really kind of makes the effects
acceptable.
Yeah, acceptable is probably the right word. I mean, King Can is a good example of this, where really often when you play King Can being a older version of this type of card, you didn't actually get the best copy off, or even your opponent just killed the thing that you were naming, because of course red's not great at setting up these types of things.
Yeah.
The thing is that the base of it, you're still cantripping,
right.
So it never put you behind. It just was another threat that your opponent needed to deal with. This being 3 mana, I think a lot of the roads are more expensive than the 2 that all the journeys are.
Yeah.
This 3 mana does make that cost of actually putting in play more expensive, and the cantrip doesn't make up as much. But I think the actual effect on this is pretty powerful if you can get it going. Because even if you're just copying a Terraformer's Globe or something incredibly basic like that, you're still getting a lot of upside. That is, of course, if you can get the hidden, which is a big question. But even there's the baseline of what you're copying is pretty high. Just because a permanent copy is a big deal.
You know what would be extra funny? If you can animate these guys and then get the hit in. Imagine naming itself and then animating it and then whacking your opponent with it.
Yeah, that would be kind of funny. But a good thing that you could name with it is Ntsuyu.
Did we not ask for a pronunciation for that?
I don't believe so.
Too bad. I guess we don't have time to ask, so we're just gonna improvise.
Masterpiece, which artifact and enchantment.
And creature. So it enables Concord and Civilize all on its own.
Yeah, and importantly, it is copyable off this Cosmic Expansion. which is nice, and has ward too. So can't be killed by removal, and has flying. Whoa. And gets bigger when you get more of them. Whoa.
Oh, but 3 mana, and it doesn't do anything on the board when it ETBs.
Well, I mean, like, I think at this point people know that cranial plating is a good card, and I feel like saying that this does nothing on the board is stretching a bit too far with
yeah, maybe.
big creatures being bad. And this has ward too, so it doesn't even die Doomblade, kind of.
But like, what deck are you playing it in? Because if you're playing both Cosmic Expansion and Intissua's Masterpiece, like Intissua's Masterpiece looks like it wants to be in an aggressive Affinity-like deck, but Cosmic Expansion seems like it wants to be in some sort of mid-rangey deck.
That's fair. 3-dot slot is definitely pretty contested, but it is definitely a pretty powerful combination of cards.
Yeah.
As well as Intisu's Masterpiece goes, it is just scary enough that you can justify playing robots purely off this card.
Actually, someone did run that deck through League. I mean, Intisu's Masterpiece managed to put in work quite often.
Yeah, there are a couple of other similar types of cards where you have the crab, Rustel Crustacean.
Yeah, Rustel Crustacean.
And then you have the Synchronous Battle Armor, I think.
I feel like both of them are just a lot worse than Intisua's Masterpiece.
Yeah, they have different upsides. I mean, Crustacean draws equipment and makes mana. The Battle Armor is a really ridiculous board breaker. They're like blocking one, taps down 3 things. And then Masterpiece is just really hard to kill and has evasion. So,
but like you can't play all of them, right?
Like all of them.
You only have room for maybe just one playset of top end in your artifact aggro deck.
Yeah, probably. Definitely in blue-white. I can't you can't really play dorks or anything to try and justify anything anymore. So yeah, you probably need to pick 2 of them, which does probably push out Cosmic Expansion.
You also
from what I can tell is
you also have Observe of Aeons as another robot top end.
Yeah, though that maybe even exacerbates the issue of having too much high end.
Yeah.
So maybe even competes with the 3/3 drops. Yeah, and from what I can see just from looking at the artifact enchantment creatures, it's not a ton that's super interesting for Cosmic Expansion. If you're looking for a 2-drop in particular, like there's stuff like Hexplate Companion, if you really want to go deep on it. I think maybe Mechano Mind Researcher is interesting, though doesn't care about it being a enchantment. Plasma Blader, I guess it might be an interesting thing to do. Turn 2 Plasma Blader, turn 3 Cosmic Expansion. It's been on your line. Velatian Renegade is actually another solid one, though can't upgrade immediately. So, but maybe a card to keep in mind for future set releases, because if you do have like a evasive 2-drop artifact or enchantment creature, then it does absolutely take it off the game pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have Fletcher Calcu. Wait, is that right?
I think it should be right.
Okay, good. So this is, what do you even call these kind of counterbalance escafettes? Is there a broad name for it? Is it just counterbalance E?
I don't think there's an official name for it.
Well, basically, you have to play a game with the opponent.
I mean, I guess Kozilek had that effect, so it's like a Kozilek effect.
Yeah, I guess at that point you might as well just call it counterbalance.
Counterbalance but not from the top of the deck.
Yeah, counterbalance for mana value. But this card's really good. It has a lot of high numbers where, like, if this card does what it wants to do, you're really happy playing it. Where it's a looter that loots on ETB. Doesn't go to graveyard, unfortunately, but whatever. I guess it rummages, right? Not loots.
Yeah.
Also, does it on attack, and then
wait, it does it on attack.
Also a counterspell, kind of. Yeah, it does do it on attack.
Oh, I didn't realize. I thought it only did on ETB. Okay, now I'm even way more excited about this card.
So it does definitely have some downside. I mean, how good the attack actually is kind of questionable, because if you're wanting to use the counterspell mode, then are you really attacking with this and risking it? Because it trades with everything, right?
Yeah.
So you'd only really be doing that into pretty particular control decks. And even then you have to be concerned about like Cane Dancer and stuff, ambush blocking you. So maybe I guess you put a 2-drop under it, so then they can't Cane Dancer ambush you.
Yeah, but then I guess that works. Okay, so what about the activate ability?
Yeah, so the activate ability, like I don't know how condensed mana value wise MSEM is, because I think in a lot of like canon formats you go, okay, well you do a 1 or 2 drop and you're going to hit something all the time. I don't think that's necessarily true with MSEM.
Really? I mean, like cursory glance though.
Yeah, because your glance hits 1, 2, 3, like a 0 to 3, whereas this hits 1 mana value. So it feels easier to play around in that respect, and like less likely that you actually get it off easily. Well, like your opponent definitely has to take like a bit of a dive to like guess what you have under it.
Yeah, and that would
But
actually be really funny, right? Or trying to play around this card because you just don't
yeah,
know.
but as like the person playing it, I don't know how much you can actually rely on using the ability. So I feel like you kind of need to back it up with counter spells just in case the ability doesn't work. But then you're kind of in like the weird state where you're playing counter spells onto and then Calcu as well. I guess maybe Sinkhole makes up for that a lot.
Yeah.
Though ability is pretty bad against Sinkhole because it's of course X spells messing you up there.
Well, if they got you to waste a sinkhole, then I think you're pretty happy about that. Wait, right?
If I'm saying that if someone's playing Sinkhole against you and you're playing Calcu, they can like sink more mana to Sinkhole uselessly to stop you from countering it.
Then you just pay for. Oh, right, you can't pay for it.
The melee then, yeah. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that this card's like really messy because I don't know if you can rely on it necessarily. So it's kind of weird in aspects. So you need to play instant speed kind of defaultly.
Yeah, but it's a sorcery speed creature.
Yeah, it's a sorcery speed creature, and then like it like sometimes can attack, sometimes can't. And then you need to be heavy blue too. So most control decks I don't think can really afford. Like say if you're trying to like play this on turn 4, I don't think like getting triple blue on turn 4 isn't hard, but it's not like trivial. So there's a cost that aspect in that aspect.
Yeah.
And then if you're playing this on turn 4, then like you don't know what your opponent is going to play mana value wise. Like, are they going to play the 1 mana removal spell for this guy, or are they going to play the Infected Seagull? And it's like also not is, but then it's like also Luda, right? So maybe you just ignore the counter spell thing instead and say, yeah, I'm putting a land of this.
And you get to
cool.
You get to like mind games your opponent. I mean,
yeah, but it's just kind of a funky card in general. And I'm not quite sure where this fits in deck building wise, even though it is absolutely powerful card, and I think it's hard to say how much like value getting that counter spell is on a card that's already pretty efficient. If you're just using it as a looter, but yeah, I think it's kind of hard to make like ideal scenarios for this type of card. Moving on, we have Weku, blind Weku.
Sure, just call it Weku. Malignity Spirit. Not Malign, it's Malignity.
Malignity. That is an English word. Yeah. So I think we both immediately saw that Weku has the all-important demon subtype.
Yay! So that means
all cards playable.
That means you can fetch it with Profane Emissary. It's always fun because Profane Emissary's tutor pool grows every set.
Yeah, so there's not too much competition at 4 mana for Profane Emissary targets.
Really?
With laws.
Don't you have Jejun at 4 mana?
Right? Kinda, but Jejun is...
Oh, it's 6 mana.
Yeah, I mean, you can cast Jejun for 4, but like... that often involves hacking a Profane Emissary, which isn't always worth it. And it is really bad if it gets countered or removed before you get a lifelink proccing because you just paid 6 life for it.
Right.
Whereas Weku at least only costs 4.
So with Weku, you get to pay for a life to play into your hand, and then it gains you for a life back once it dies.
Yeah, so pay for it getting hand. So I mean that's 1 Profane MSA hit, so not too big of a deal.
It's a 4 mana flying Death Toucher, and I think you mentioned before how Death Touch on big guys is actually still a lot better than you think.
Yeah, melee flying does diminish it a little bit, just because one of the reasons that Death Touch on big guys is scary is just that like you can't double block them at all because just everything dies on your side. Both flying, it's like it does do defensive work. Does trade with Azos and stuff if that's still in play, but 4 mana 4/4 fly is still a pretty good stat line.
Yeah.
And then you have the ability, which it draws you 4 cards and gains 4 life for 4 mana. Wow,
amazing!
That's a pretty good card, Ricky.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Exactly. Like, there's no way the game could go on for 4 more turns after you already got that much of an advantage from him.
Yeah, exactly. So immediately Fan MSA decks definitely aren't the best at closing out the game. Just kind of in general, that's not what their forte is. There are you can definitely. I think you can definitely make decks that is this the pact count isn't that much of an issue. Admittedly, this might be getting into a bit of fantasy land. Practically, you should never do this. But I think with the cards involved, it's probably reasonable where you have absolve to absolve the pact you made with Waku.
It's perfect flavor too.
Which normally would be a bit sketchy, but I mean, absolve cantrips, like, not the end of the world. Absolve kills random Valdezes, hanging around exile.
It kills random things in O-Ring or random things under banishing lights.
Yeah, I mean, kills random Fireweaver things.
Kills random impulse draws.
Like, there's stuff that absolve hits.
Kills random flickers.
Yeah, maybe you can play with flickers yourself, even.
Yeah, just play Tenuous Existence and it absolves their Tenuous Existence, or absolve the creatures when they're stuck in exile from Tenuous Existence.
Yeah, and maybe more relevantly though, absolve is fetchable off Chandru's command as a 1-mana spell. So I think this kind of comes together somewhat. Just so you only need to play one absolve, and I don't think you need to worry too much about not being able to find a Chandru's command, because Weku does give you a lot of turns, and it does draw you 4 cards.
Yeah. So actually, since Weku needs to be in your graveyard, do you discard him or do you just let him naturally die?
I think ideally you want to have the option for both. But I think it's fine just like playing one Weku, just like as a Profane Emissary target.
Well, like you're playing Profane Emissary plus Chandru's command deck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that works. Like they're both mid-rangey cards.
Yeah, Chandru's command is just generally pretty applicable. Obviously best in like Flash control decks, but the Edict mode is pretty versatile and hits most decks, even if you have a creature in play. Admittedly, Absolve might be getting too cute if you're just playing one Weku, but not too big of a deal. You can also just maybe play like Madu, for example, and discard that way. What's the you can play Shiho maybe, because that demigod mode does have a discard outlet. But I think it's pretty respectable, even if you're just playing it as kind of normal without Absolve, and just saying that, yeah, I'm going to kill you before turns is up isn't the craziest idea. Then maybe I'm underestimating how fast 4 turns go by.
Yeah, but I mean, actually, I have some sort of experience with that, with me trying to play Life's Work in my ramp deck, and turns out that Life's Work maxes out in 6 turns, but turns out 6 turns is actually a lot of time. Like, if the game makes it past 6 turns, I think either you've already lost by then, or you weren't going to win anyways, or you've already won.
Yeah, definitely at the ramp, you can swing the games really fast. So maybe you can try and make a black mid-range deck that does have that killing potential. Not sure exactly how you'd be doing that, because I think a lot of this kind of standard black mid-range cards really don't kill that fast, as opposed to like a Hail of the Shady Cove or Lady Ren Alpha, which just kills in 2 or 3 turns by itself. But maybe you can just play Wacky with like burn spells and just like, yeah, I'm drawing 4 cards and those 4 cards are all going face.
Yeah.
I mean, just like 4/4 Flying Death Touch definitely does help with that plan, because play on turn 4, swing for 4. If you kill me, I'm drawing 4, and those are going face 4 more.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have a bunch of aggressive creatures that all happen to be warriors. So at the end of this, I'll ask you how you feel about Warrior Tribal.
Okay.
So first we have Alcon Swift Hawk. 4-mana 4/3 Menace Haste. That's a pretty good stat line.
I agree.
Ability, I don't know how many things this hits, but randomly it steals Planeswalkers.
Yeah, it does.
So Bone has a glitch in play. Well, that glitch is going to be working for you for a turn now. I don't know how valuable that is, to be completely honest. I don't know how many Planeswalkers are relevant here. Because definitely decks do play them, but they're not Planeswalkers aren't omnipresent. There are also just random other things you can steal, which maybe matters. I mean, stuff like Dark Bargain is maybe an idea. Even still, like Chronicles of the Kitsune that has Accent maybe matters on defense. But I think a lot of part of this is just Planeswalkers and the stat line being good. moving on, we have Ruthless Waychef.
Ruthless Wei Cha Fei.
Chef Fair.
It's Fei and fetid. Wait, fet. Double check what China poet said. Wei as in Wei, Cha as in chopstick, and Fe as in fetid. Wei Cha Fei.
Yeah, exactly. So, 1-mana, 1/2, grows one of the creature dies. I think this is relatively efficient in terms of that kind of body, right?
Yeah, but like,
Can't think of anything off the top of my head that works like that.
I mean, it is efficient, but I don't think this is sort of efficiency or this is the sort of effect you want. Because if things are dying, then I mean, you really care that this thing's growing.
I mean, yeah, because then you have a big thing to hit them with.
Yeah, but like, are you going out of your way to find a sack outlet for this thing?
Yeah, I suppose if you're talking about Warrior Tribal specifically, that may not, but you could also just play this in Aristocrats and fetch ball for 8 Valverse.
Yeah,
It grows pretty fast.
I guess like it's an alternative to your vault keepers or disciples, I guess.
Yeah, but even just playing as a 1-of maybe. Does lose your life on the trigger, but gains life link, so should counteract that.
Yeah.
We have then Solemn Teacher. Whenever warrior control dies, you get a token copy of it. Reveling triggers on itself dying, which is kind of funky.
That persists, basically.
Yeah, more or less. So against Ras and stuff, this is pretty nasty. Then we have you're gonna need to help me on this pronunciation.
I did not ask how to pronounce that word. I was just calling it relaunch in my head, but it's probably not correct. I guess we're not pronouncing it. Sure, close enough. We're not pronouncing it correctly anyways.
That sounds more French, but so 3-mana, 3/1 trample haste, bushwhackers, and gives haste and trample. Trample is probably the important one there.
Yeah.
Also has a backside.
It's a 2-mana
which is
bite.
a Rabid Bite Warriors.
Or 2-mana bite, yeah.
But even ignoring the backside and even ignoring Warrior Tribal, is this card just like good?
I guess it is a pretty efficient bushwhacker. Although the problem is that it costs 3 mana, and bushwhackers need to be cheap, or else you're not going to be able to bushwhack the things that you play in the same turn. Maybe 3 mana is just too much for a bushwhacker.
But I mean, the body's a lot better than a bushwhacker body normally is.
Yeah.
Like bushwhackers are normally like a 2/1 even after bushwhacking, if it hits itself or not. But is this a 3/1 trample haste?
Yeah.
And this also gives trample. So if we're going back to warriors specifically, well, there's a big warrior on 2 mana, Fardancer Leech, which is a 2 mana 5/5.
Fardancer Leech is a warrior?
Yeah, Elf Druid Warrior.
Huh, interesting.
So we can go, for example, Scale Bruiser on turn 1, Fardancer Leech on turn 2, counter Scale Bruiser. Turn 3, launch Cavalry.
Okay.
Another counter Scale Bruiser. Everything gets trample. So Scale Bruiser is 4 power of trample. The Fardance is 6 power, and the launch is 3 power.
Okay.
So you swing 13 power of trample on turn 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that sound good?
That seems solid.
And then even the cavalry even gives you a removal spell on backside. So yeah.
Yeah, mono green warriors. You heard it here first. You don't even need to care about the other warriors card from this set. You just need to care about the mono green ones.
And even if like you get interrupted at some point, I think like if your Fardance Leech dies, you're still pretty happy playing cavalry on turn 3 and swinging in, because 3 power, 3 mana haste is pretty nice.
Yeah, I think I'm sold on this guy.
We still do have some more cards. We have Relentless Toki, which is very much a stat stick, that I think is an efficient enough one that probably gets the nod.
Efficient
4 mana. Yeah, so it puts 2 counters on things, can be itself. So
right.
If you're just playing itself, it's 4 mana, 5/4 haste menace. Which feels efficient enough to me.
It feels really efficient, but is this sort of efficiency warranted in the format?
I mean, 5, like, what, for 3 mana, I don't even know if there's a Bolt Lightning in this format. Before triple red, you're getting 6 damage face, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, practically, this is like basically always hitting face the time it comes into play, right?
Right.
And you're leaving behind a 5/4 menace. Like, that seems good.
Yes, it does seem really good.
Like, it can give it to other things, and which is like maybe relevant too. Though Amelia is probably always giving it to self just for haste.
But like, if incidentally your other guys have counters already.
Yeah, the fact that it does give you the other guy's menace potentially. I mean, Scale Bruiser getting menace is pretty nice.
Yeah.
It does compete with Tarkran War Leader, which 2 green 2/2 distribute 3 counters. Battle creatures have trample. I think it's probably better than that just because it itself can get haste. Even if trample is probably better than menace most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm sold on that card too.
And outside of Warriors, I think this is also a pretty good top end for decks that are trying to use Vassal of the Wild as their mana dwarf of choice. Because Vassal of the Wild is a pretty scary card. Very good dwarf.
Yeah.
But then to top it all off, we have Mutilated Warrior, which very much so a Warrior tribal card. 2 mana 3/1 first strike, ETB. Each players take damage equal to the number of warriors control.
Each player. Huh. So it means that you have to be an aggro deck.
Yeah, it is a May, so it doesn't kill yourself. If you're on 1 life, whatever. It's not dead against burn or anything. But so looking at those warriors, knowing that Fardan's Liege and Scalebuza are noble warriors in the format already, what do you think about Warrior Tribal?
I think
As a
it's
deck.
a lot of solid cards. I feel like it won't actually have that much synergy pieces. It's just going to be a bunch of incidentally good warriors and then like one top end lord that incidentally
Yeah, there
happens
was
to be really
the
good.
OTH Warrior Lord, Valdios's champion.
Not the worst cascade creature or cascadey guy.
Yeah, but admittedly the other Cascade guys are like insane, so even a bad one is pretty good.
So what? But if you're playing around until his champion, you're not playing the other top end guy, right? Can you afford to play two play sets of 4-drops in your tribal aggro deck?
Yeah, you probably be choosing between them, but champion does have like a fair amount of upside. Because if you champion into Solemn Teacher, for example, then if champion dies, you get another champion, which can
Yeah.
hit another Solemn Teacher.
But so you're in 3 colors, right? You're in Jund for warriors,
Well, you're playing tribal, so you're in 5 colors function.
right? Because you have
You can be.
Fardancer Liege.
Yeah, in all the tribal lands.
Actually, yeah, Radis's champion. If you cascade into Lalon Cavalry, then you get to haste your guy too.
Yeah, so that would be 7 points of haste trample coming off the top, which is even better than Relentless Toki.
Yeah, I think.
And there are some other warrior tribal cards like Deathwood Revolutionary is okay, Llanowar War Exemplar, Stubborn Blade Mate, maybe.
I think warrior has legs.
Good to hear it.
Yeah, like it's kind of similar to pirates in a way because like it's like pirates in that it's got the core piece that it needed to actually be good. How's it doing on 1-drops?
I think Scabbers is the main one.
Do you have more 1-drops? Because like pirates was suffering from not enough good 1-drops.
I mean, Banished Companion is a warrior, so at the very least you have that. Let's see. Lieutenant Daisy Saxon is a warrior, and that's a pretty good one. The Cattle Skirmisher is another decent one. And we mentioned Rufus Waychief. Waychaff. Yeah, we pronounce that. But maybe not best in pure warriors. Scaleboozer, we mentioned. Panya is a warrior. If you want
a warrior?
Doing that. Valden's Liberator, Wildwood Aspirant. I think you have enough that it's not really an issue.
Yeah. Okay, I think warrior definitely has legs then.
Moving on, we have Obstinacy, which is another. What is this cycle even called?
Villainy cycle.
Is this the Villainy cycle? As Villainy was the prototype.
Yeah. And now we have a second Villainy cycle going on. Actually, I think the second cycle should be called Authenticity cycle because that's what started the second cycle.
Yeah, I think depending on which ones you want to. I don't even know which ones came first at this point. Because then in Revolution, there's military.
Yeah.
In Rev, we have MSEM, we have creativity, right?
Yeah.
There's the only red one besides obstinacy.
Yep.
Maybe the red one should be Rapacious Rattler and MSA Integrity.
Well, maybe you put those cards in the deck with obstinacy.
Yeah, I think that's probably a sure shot way to win some games. So Omniscient itself, kind of like Berserk, kind of can wait. Does Berserk give trample?
I believe does it? I think it does. Can you just double check that? Because I don't remember what cannon cards do.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So you can kind of Berserk something. I mean, it's even better than Berserk because if you do have a red creature ETBing, you get the +1/+1, which is then doubled.
Yeah.
So most basic thing would be that if you're an Obstinance in play, you play at an MSA of Integrity, it gets the buff, you attack, you double its power, boom, 8 damage.
Yeah, and or you can do it the other way around, where you play MSA first and then you recast Obstinacy off of it. And then I guess you do something next turn or something.
Yeah, and then you play another MSA next turn.
Yeah.
So obviously it works well. Haste creatures works well with token makers.
You want your token makers to make one token at a time because it sees one or more creatures.
Yeah, I think that's generally pretty doable. Can't do anything like boarding body, I think it was.
Can't play.
Or some of the stuff like newcomers luck.
Well, but it does work with creatures that make tokens on ETB. So isn't there like a pirate that makes a pirate on ETB?
Yes. Though in that only the token has haste.
Right.
There's also stuff like Graga, which is with the with shout here, and of course Oros is pretty darn good for drop. But basically anything with power and haste really like this. Anything with power is also pretty good here. Does of course have the issue of like you need to give up on turn 3 to play something that doesn't really affect the board, but probably worthwhile with at least looking at.
Yeah.
Just because it does do so much damage.
So since we're still in
moving
big
on,
red, let's talk about Ancient Pillin. It's called Pillin, right? I'm pronouncing it correctly, right?
You probably know better than me because I've been reading it as Pillion all this time.
Okay,
It was Pillin.
close enough.
So 4 mana, 4/4 trample, ETB, fight something. Sounds reasonable.
It's a 4/4, so it's basically a Flametongue Cabu, right? Like Flametongue Cabu is pretty good.
Yeah, fighting is a downside. I mean, especially if we're talking about stuff like Infectious Ego, Fan MSA, because not only does it trade, but it also gains them some life. But trample is pretty appreciated on 4 drops.
Yeah. And even if it dies after fighting, you're fine with that because it has a backside for some reason. Like, for some reason, every single good red creature has a backside.
Yeah, people were like, oh, yeah, well, burn spells are kind of okay, so what if we tossed another card onto it?
Yeah.
Really, I don't think Volcano Sacrifice is a very good card.
What? It's like 4 mana,
like,
deal 3 damage?
Like, I think if you're putting this on your own, it's probably costing 1 mana. Maybe 2 mana instant. But
I mean, it's just 3 upside. It's randomly
it's 3 upside.
randomly going to snipe something, and you'll feel pretty good about it.
I'm not sure how I feel about this card just because you have Kumulang as another kind of FDK type cards that does a very similar kind of thing. And from what I've understand, Kumulang is not terribly great in Big Red.
Yeah, but it requires you to exile a card from a yard. That's probably a lot harder to do than just fighting.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're talking about Volcano Sacrifice being potential upside, then I mean the Demigod mode is definitely upside.
Well, let's see. The thing is, the Demigod mode
Planeswalkers too.
requires Queen Milan to survive. The Volcano Sacrifice does not require Ancient Pillin to survive. In fact, it requires it to die.
That's fair. But the other question is there going to be enough slots in Big Red for 4 drops?
I mean,
when we have Tunu as another card that
I thought you were going to talk about Oros as the other 4 drop.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Oros is assumed.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're playing 80 cards. You can afford at least 1 more 4 drop. But are you really going to play Ancient Pillin when you can play the new and improved Tunu?
Which has 3 devotion.
Yeah. Yeah, so Tunu got a change with the release of Caru Mapu. Now instead of being 4 starting loyalty +2 -3.
Yeah.
The +2 is now +1, but also on top some mountain. And the starting I think that's the only buff it got. But it is a very significant buff.
Yeah. So plussing it immediately actually does something now.
Yeah, so you can go 2 on 4, +1 on top of mountain, immediately play burn spell. The Flames Approach, 2, of course, doubling your mana for mountains.
Well, you're hoping to flip Flames Approach off the top.
Yeah, I was even just saying from hand.
It also works.
You can on 5 mana, you can also go 2 and then +1 on top of mountain Oros.
That's 4 damage right there. That's like better than Ancient Pillin because it doesn't have to fight.
Yeah, I believe it does take 2 cards, but then you have Double Man next turn for Oros cracking itself to draw 3 cards. So kind of upsides there. There's also a new card from Sparks of a Multiverse. I think that's called the set is called.
Yeah.
Tanya, another good 2-drop.
We're probably gonna talk about Tanya in its own set review, but here's a preview of what it does.
Yeah, and Tanya has a middle phase, so works even if you on tapping with 2 new.
Yeah.
So That's it. That's it. I mean, Tuna seems better than Ancient Pillin to me. If we're looking at 4 drops and Big Red,
No, I
what do you
agree.
think?
I agree, but maybe Ancient Pillin has a place. Maybe if you're not playing it in a big red. Maybe if you so it's not fighting for space with those 2 cards.
I think even outside Big Red, it's like has some rough competition. Like, is it better than like Hellion Devastator? Like,
Well, it's not 3-colored for one.
yeah, but like, okay, well, how about like Commanding Princess?
It's not 2-colored for one.
I mean, yeah, but if you're saying you're not playing a mono red, like you're gonna have to add another color somewhere.
Yeah, it probably doesn't get there, but hey, it looked really good on its surface. But yeah, it's not going to be playable.
Okay, but what about the Pillin War?
Ooh, the Pillin War.
Which
It's
I guess Ancient Pillin probably had a part in.
so it's also triple devotion. So are you going to run this in your mono red deck? And the answer is no because you don't have enough
No, because
creatures.
it does nothing. Um, so 5-power creatures are not terribly common. I'll admit that. We have mentioned stuff like Pot Answer Leech, though the mana in that is probably a bit hard.
Is it? I mean, part answer leech. It lets you play 5 colors, right?
Yeah, but for tribal stuff, not so much for enchantments. Well, there's Toki.
Yeah, the thing we talked
Does
about
get up
earlier.
to 5 power. You do also have some other stuff like I'm blanking on it. Fortune Dealer
Right.
is another card that gets up to 5 power.
And it's also triple
Um,
colored, so playing your 3
yeah,
guy and your red
yeah.
guy.
The mana on this is definitely not exciting, shall we say? There's some other random stuff like Alien Visitor. So Amelie, the deck building requirements are not great, but I mean, if you do get this trigger off, does do a lot, right?
Yeah, it does a lot of things, like wiping your opponent's board.
And only 5 for them.
Yeah, and wiping your opponent's board again
Yeah,
next turn.
yeah. So there are definitely some decks that just like can't beat this. Can be counted too, though. Can't imagine. I guess that's probably relevant enough. Just because it does hit the opponent's face for a ton.
Yeah, like if you already have a big creature out, your control opponent can't counter this card. You try to play it. They're forced to kill the creature instead.
But is pretty novel regardless. Moving on, we have Priest Tunu, which has a pretty crazy ability. Whenever when you cast an instant sorcery, you basically wheel
Yeah,
shovels into your deck. But
that might actually be an upside.
yeah, definitely. I'd assume you'd try want it. Probably be very happy doing this trigger as many times as possible if you're building your deck with the card in mind. So I think the most immediate thing that comes to mind is Dang's Artistry,
Uh,
which has a whenever you draw a card trigger.
oh, so you can just ping something down and then start gaining life.
Yeah, so you can just fire off a ton of 1-drops. This is also pretty good with Unceasing Flames. As you have enough cards in hand, you can just continuously fire off Unceasing Flames.
So I guess the problem is getting enough cards in hand because this thing doesn't let you go up at cards. It just lets you reshuffle.
Yeah, you could just play this in like blue-red tempo-y stuff, play some cantrips so you don't go down cards immediately,
But
and then fire off Unceasing Flames a bunch.
do you want to play unimpactful creatures in your tempo deck?
I mean, if like 2-1 prowess haste isn't a bad stat line just to throw out.
Right.
And if you do, and it does functionally loot, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah.
And there's definitely an argument for card quality.
Honestly, I'm just waiting for someone to play this card and then get super sad when they eventually break and draw a hand of all lands.
Yeah, that would be pretty sad.
Yeah.
Um,
Like people have done that with Oros before, where they tried to wheel with it and then drawn all lands. No, it's not with Oros. It was with Ninhasir's March, where you flip Ninhasir and then you draw all lands off the backside.
yeah, that's especially sad because you get so excited because you're going to copy a spell with Nahasi of it, and it's like, oh no, you drew 2 lands. Oof.
Yeah.
And your opponent's always dead to the burn spell, right?
Yeah.
They're never not dead to the burn spell. But speaking of burn spells, we have another one who refused to submit, which, as per tradition, is a lightning strike with upside.
With the backside, that you mean?
Yeah. War Council, another loot effect. I think this is probably not as good as Raga's Frenzy. It does have a better face side that deals 5 damage to attacking creature. So it does just kill within MSA straight up.
It also kills Infectious Ego.
It does. Would have to take an additional trigger off of Ego. Probably some other random things it kills that I'm not thinking of now.
4 toughness guys, that's like the most important part. Because Mono Red has struggled with 4 toughness guys before.
Yeah, the only issue is that it's only attacking 4 toughness guys, which
most 4 toughness guys will attack eventually.
I suppose that's fair, but you are pretty predictable if you're holding this up. War Council is okay. I think it's probably notably worse than Rogers of Frenzy's flashback mode.
Besides not being instant speed on the backside.
Yeah, it not being instant speed is a bit annoying. And I think it's just generally a bit too expensive for filtering. Where I think you're only really playing this if you only have lands in hand.
Hey, that's something that could totally happen if you try to flip up your Ninjas here.
Oh, I suppose so. But it's kind of like it's not very. If you're ever casting War Council, I think you're pretty sad.
Yeah.
And you're not feeling so hard in the game. Moving on, we have Chasqui Veteran. Is that right?
We're finally going to the green cards now.
Which, one mana 2/1 Trample. Trample not a super common keyword on 1-drops. And if you control 3 or more artifacts and enchantments, when it hits someone, you draw a card.
So, first of all,
that sounds good to me.
The stat line looks super pushed, but I don't think it's going to be playable.
Well, okay, so when I'm thinking about this card, I'm playing this turn 1. How do I make this draw turn 2? Right, and if it's drawing on turn 2, I think it's playable, right?
It's playable, but like the thing is, you really want to be putting in all this work to make yourself draw cards, because I feel like this goes in an aggro deck, right? You'd rather just be You'd rather be spending more effort trying to get through damage and then incidentally drawing cards instead of trying to force a card draw and then incidentally getting through damage.
Yeah, but if you just remove that, if you control 3 or more artifacts enchantment, but obviously significant. If you just remove that for a second, it is just like a great card, right?
Yeah, it's like Ragavan, except actually worse than Ragavan because can't dash it, but close enough.
You mean kind of Ragavan, not?
Yeah, kind of Ragavan.
Ragavan. So how much cost does it actually take to trigger this on turn 2? I think even on turn 3, I think you'd be pretty happy playing it if you have it by then.
So like you have to play a bunch of rail lines.
Yeah, rail lines. But I think in general we can just look to Founding Hero decks, right? Because I mean, Founding Hero needs 2 of these 3 things to get active.
Yeah, but like if you look at Oxfox, most of the time they're barely triggering Civilized. Like you're getting 2 things in play is pretty easy. Getting 3 things in play is extremely hard, or at least not extremely hard on turn 2. Hey, I should probably load up Oxfox, just example.
Yeah, but if you load up Oxfox, you can see that, hey, well, this is playing 4 citywide automation.
Wait, huh? Oh yeah, good point.
Which happens to turn on immediately. And I mean, you mentioned rail lines, but you have 1, then it becomes much easier to turn on turn 2.
And since I'm in 2 colors, I have to be splashing green. I can run both rail lines.
Yep. And so it works with Founding Hero. And also, I think the trample part of it is really relevant.
Yeah, right, because Oxfox has trouble getting through blockers. Well, before Chronicles of Kitsune.
Maybe there are some issues just throwing it straight into Oxfox, because certain things kind of don't quite work with it in Oxfox. I mean, Village Council, very important card in Oxfox, doesn't buff this, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But if you can start talking about like ethereal armor and all that glitters. And well, not only is this a great recipient of those cards, also working with those cards, having the same condition, but it also kind of makes up for those cards being kind of dead weight, or like making your hand run out with the cast because it draws cards.
Sure. Are you saying that you're trying to put these enchantments on the guy and then trying to draw with it turn 2, or are you saying that like you should put on the enchantments onto this guy after?
Yeah, I'm thinking that you go like turn 1 veteran, turn 2 citywide automation, swing, draw, and then play like Chronicles of Kitsune and 2 ethereal armors.
Yeah, I guess that could work.
And that being more doable because veteran draws.
Right.
Whether that's happening turn 3 or turn 4 or whatnot, doesn't really matter. But basically, you have a good recipient of ethereal armor, and the downside of ethereal armor being really hard negative is kind of taken back from the curiosity trigger.
Right. I'm kind of sold on it.
Is maybe a bit of a question what else you get in green. because a green aggro is not super explored, especially green artifact enchantment aggro.
You get the sheep, right?
Oh yeah, Inconspicuous Sheep, in King 4 is a good shout. You get Seto-san, so maybe you play that Seto-san, you play Ring of Soul, Cinderblade,
Yeah.
that kind of idea. But moving on, we have Veins of the Unishtu.
Are you calling it Initiative?
NTCU, sorry. Which another one of these another one of these roads is definitely on the slower side.
It's 3 mana. Why is it 3 mana?
Because it works for a lot of things. For example, through the Ashen Gate.
Huh.
So
like-
turn 3, play Veins, play through the Ashen Gate, and you have a pretty respectable ramp card. You have a Rampant Growth that draws a card, and then you can flash back through the Ashen Gate on falling turn, get another Rampant Growth effect.
So basically, it's 3 mana, ramp 2 lands, but slowly.
Yeah, I mean, if you draw multiple through the Ashen Gate, then it's much faster.
Okay, so the problem here is, why are you playing through the Ashen Gates and Veins in the same deck?
Well, I see they combine because
Yes.
you see you're investigating, so you want more mana to crack the clues.
Yeah, but what deck are you putting these 2 cards into? Because 3 Ashen Gate doesn't really synergize with what Veins is doing, right? It's just that they randomly have a combo.
Sure. Well, I mean, they have synergy because it makes the Ashen Gate a much more reasonable draw spell. But if you want to kind of expand that, it'd just be one of those like there's a lot of black green mid rangey kind of things with Infectious Ego and whatnot,
Right.
and Ramsey and that kind of idea.
But this probably isn't good in a dedicated ramp deck because it requires too much resources to ramp, or too much deck space to ramp.
I mean, you say that, but deck space potentially does take up a pretty valuable 3-drop slot, which Offie takes up. Presuming you're playing Offie.
Or I guess if you're going with the new version where you're playing all these land rampers, then it's taking place of those land rampers. But yeah.
But it does it does itself cantrip. So
Right.
even if you're just doing it once, it's like absolutely fine.
So it's kind of like Old Tower of the Sky in a way, because that is Old Tower over the Sky with Lil Pig basically ramped you by 2 on 3 mana, and then also drew a card in your graveyard to flash back later.
Yeah. Kind of like that. Yeah. It is probably might end up just being too slow. Maybe you can just play with dorks in general to kind of make that up. Though merely considering Tower of the Sky and Little Pig wasn't super broken in that respect, this probably isn't either.
Yeah.
So probably best to move on. We have Victory over Phyrexia,
which is quite topical to say the least. I'm sure this started design way before we ever got news of what the latest set will be. So
yeah. Well, this is this set's been submitted to MSEM a number of times. I think this is third or fourth time.
Yeah, it's like at least a few years old by now, right?
So definitely predates any modern canon lore. But the god itself does a fair bit. The destroys a cheap artifact enchantment, which is nice.
Although it has the nature state condition of being 3 or less, and you can't change that state, like with Relic Corrosion.
So that's nice. Hits random primal resurgences and realigns and Egg of Avarices and Karn's Kitsune and what have you. And then if that's not good, then gain 3 like draw card.
It's revitalized. Well, it's sorcery speed, so it's worse revitalized, but at least you still get the cantrip.
Yeah, it is maybe not like super exciting because I mean 2 mana sorcery speed is pretty meh. Even in decks that can afford this kind of effect, but it does have the backside, which I think of the legacy cards we looked at so far, as this is probably the most competitively costed one.
For 5 mana at the beginning of your end steps, it triggers right away. You get to tutor up any creature, and then it continues doing that if it's not dealt with.
So I think you could kind of argue for Victory of Phyrexia in a similar kind of vein. You can argue for Wildlife Sketches, in that you have it may be a bit of an opposite way, where Wildlife Sketches has a really efficient front face, and then the plot effect is okay. Whereas here, the front face is okay, and then the backside is pretty darn efficient, or pretty respectable at least as a late game win condition.
Yeah. So, do you think you'd mostly be running this as, or are you gonna mostly be running this as a main deck card, mostly for the backside, and incidentally, it's gonna randomly kill an artifact or enchantment, or are you just gonna run it as a sideboard card specifically for the artifact enchantment kill, and then randomly you get to play the backside?
I think you just play this main deck, to be honest. Like, I think enough decks have random artifacts and enchantments kill that it's not that big of a deal. And I mean, cantripping is fine too, of course. Because as a sideboard card, it's really awkward, I think. Because I think you would just prefer playing Relic Corrosion if you want the artifact and enchantment hate.
Right.
And I think most of the decks you want the artifact enchantment hate, or I guess the burn hate too, with the life gain, don't really, the decks that you're bringing those in against don't really care about 5 mana value top end.
Right.
In general.
And also, it's really inefficient hate on the front side too, right? 2 mana at sorcery speed for limited mana value.
But I think if you're building around this, or building with this in mind as like a Pithwilt kind of card, where you're saying, oh yeah, I have enough creature hate, I don't need Pithwilt exactly, I can afford to play this slightly clunkier card, maybe have mana acceleration somewhere else in the deck, and I just need some kind of random thing that hits artifact enchantments, maybe shores up my control matchup a little bit. And maybe this is a nice card. It gives you some life gain too, which is always nice. So you play 1 or 2 of these, pretty happy with it. Is kind of how I imagine that this card would be played.
Right.
Moving on, we have another legacy card in Kaivilu.
Close enough.
Ocean Warden.
Sure. I'll assume it's correct.
Kaivilu? I don't know. So I know 6 mana is a lot. For 6 mana, does this card do what you want it to do? I.e., does this kill your opponent's board?
Yes, it does against certain decks. Like -2/-2, that's a Drowned Sorrow. It's a one-sized Drowned Sorrow at instant speed with the 4/4.
Yeah,
and it randomly holds stuff with abilities.
Yeah, I think the lose abilities it's probably more relevant than you'd expect. Because it hits a lot more things. I mean, it hits Profane MSA, for example.
Yeah, right. One shot
hits
Profane.
Complete kills Seek of Untouched Beauty and prevents the death trigger.
That's hilarious.
It does kill Fardan's Elite, right?
I think so. Yeah, it should.
There's no weirdness on layers there.
No.
Prevents can randomly kill a Monument of Queens, maybe, because you can flash it in and loses flying, and so you can block and kill it. Let's see.
It doesn't trigger death effects. That's a big one.
Yeah, if you're playing against any kind of Aristocrats deck, that's nice. Also, kind of, so I think it's pretty good at killing Planeswalkers in general, because you can flash an end step and then kill all the tokens the Planeswalker made and then attack.
It still has it only hits for 4, but if the Planeswalker is low enough, then it just insta dies.
Yeah. And then there's a whole bunch of random other stuff like Children of the Clouds. This having flash makes some nice ancient children.
That's actually pretty hilarious.
Let's see any other notable things.
It wrecks grade if your opponent tries to if your opponent's playing that grade plus what's that guy Caru deck, flash it in response to their grades attacking, and then all of their squirrels die.
Yeah. So if you I think this card does do what it's meant to do. It is 6 mana, which of course is a lot. So can you? I think you can probably afford playing this as just a 1 of 6 mana.
You can play it in a control deck.
Right?
Like, does Unrelenting fetch this?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, just play it as a Unrelenting target.
Yeah, sounds pretty reasonable. Also, I think as far as Mabel decks go, this might be the best Wrath you have access to. I remember when I made Esper Mabel in the past. I guess I should specify Esper, because you get Sheldrain's Rage in red. But in Esper Mabel, you don't have access to that many Wraths. So this is my idea. Also, we haven't even mentioned the backside.
Yeah, it has backside.
Which is maybe okay sometimes.
It's a 7 mana board clear, I guess.
Each player discards 2 cards.
Yeah.
Very relevant. Does let it kill tokens twice. Once on the DB, once on the legacy.
The thing is, like, against the decks that this thing's good against, is it even going to ever die? Like, if you resolve this thing, the game's probably over.
I don't really go that far. I mean, especially against decks that, like, we're talking about Monument of Queens and Children of the Clouds and like Seek of Untouched Beauty. Right. I think most of those decks can definitely pick themselves back up, even if this does clear the board. I mean, that's even forgetting stuff like Infectious Ego. Which, yeah, this does ambush block, but if this is killing Infectious Ego, you're still getting hit twice by it.
Right.
So I think the game's definitely still continuing after that.
Yeah, so I guess eventually you're gonna reset the board again, and maybe it'll stick that time.
Yeah. Also, maybe it's an idea to play it with like Wheat from Chaff. I know Scribble has played Control decks with Wheat from Chaff a couple times.
You even want to discard? Like, I don't think the 7-mana board clear is what you're looking for, though. You'd rather, like, it's just a 7-mana incidental board clear instead of something you're specifically looking for.
But the thing is that it's incidental upside. So if you're playing this already and you have a 10-1 Wheat from Chaff, then it's like, oh, well, yeah, I don't want a 6-drop in my opening hand, so I'll discard it.
Right.
That's kind of how I'm thinking of it.
And then, like, 8 turns down the line, you randomly clear the board.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, yeah, I can see that happening.
Moving on to something a bit more proactive, we have Milleray and Tilanka, which has a lot of different effects.
So it's a Planeswalker with a passive, which at the beginning of your end step, you mill 2 and gain 2 life. So yeah, incidental self-mill, always nice if you want that sort of effect, and it also instantly gains you life, so that means...
Which is always pretty nice as well.
So +1 is discard a card and then draw a card, so it's the same +1 as Sahari, and like I've played Sahari...
Doesn't get you life, right?
What?
Sahari gains you life, right?
Yeah, it also gains you life, so kind of close. It's the plussing is pretty similar to how Sahari works. Now, I've played Sahari in ramp before, and Sahari's +1 is surprisingly good.
And then the -2, if you have 6 cards in graveyard, makes 3 1/1s.
I mean, you can easily get to 6 cards on turn 3.
Can you?
If you're like really working for it, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. You probably need to play a dedicated mill spell on turn 2.
Well, on turn 3 or on the turn afterwards, you definitely can, because he's gonna mill he's also milling you.
Yeah, and as well as looting.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the usual play pattern is drop her turn 3 +1 and hope she survives for -2 next turn.
Yeah.
And what, you pay 3 mana to loot, gain 2 life, and make 3 1/1s. Is that an alright outcome?
I think it's like fine. I think you're also playing this if you already want the mill, less so if you want as like I think if you're just playing mill away as like a self-enabling planeswalker, I think she's just kind of like okay.
Yeah.
But I think if you just want to fill the graveyard innately, I think she is quite good. In that kind of like in the way that she makes your deck function, not in that she is like the headline card or anything like that.
Right.
We're just going like turn 2 Muckbruiser, turn 2 Milleray, or turn 3 Milleray, is a pretty respectable curve and does force your opponent to deal with whatever you have going on.
Speaking of which, didn't you build a deck around that?
Yeah, I put together John Ramp list.
Let me try to find where it is.
Treasure list, where you also include mana dorks in the deck. The logic being that not only can you turn 2 Milleray, which makes it a lot more difficult to deal with, and makes that end of step trigger get a lot more value, but also you can discard the mana dorks later on in the game.
Yeah, looting is always nice in ramp decks like that for that sort of effect.
Yeah, whenever you have fairly dead cards, filtering is always really valuable. And then the life gain also helps you play stuff like Nightmares Unseen, which has a pretty steep life cost. In that kind of deck, the value with -2 is probably not that high, though Amelia is nice to have access to if your Muckbruiser dies and get out of threats.
Yeah. I mean, but the fact that you have a planeswalker that you're mostly happy just plussing is pretty nice, because you don't have to put extra work into defending it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, we have Envoy Divine Progress, which, the first line is protection for mana value 2 or less, which is a
2-drop,
pretty valuable line of text.
Less. I mean, you don't see that sort of line of text often on 2-drops. It just means that it can't be interacted at all early game.
Yep. And then it also has a combat damage trigger to a player, and you get an enchantment card for free.
Any enchantment card, even. So, yeah.
So notably, that means that if you play this turn 2 on the play, then you are guaranteed to get a enchantment.
Quote unquote guaranteed.
I mean, I guess you're not technically guaranteed, but like,
yeah,
your opponent's going to have to try pretty hard to stop you.
I mean, like, Fury is not in MSEM, so it's not like you can cheat the mana cost that way.
Yeah, but you'll be looking for stuff like mana dorks into 3-drops to stop this.
Yeah, so like, what are you fetching off this thing?
I think the enchantment suite isn't that great as just a general sense. I think Verdict of the Council is probably a pretty good shoe-in just in general, since it's a Generation Nowhere that also buffs the Envoy, makes it actually into a clock.
Yeah.
So if you fetch Verdict Gen 3, maybe you want to play the 3-drop, tries to block Envoy, nope, you play Verdict, killing it, so you get another hidden, grab another Verdict maybe.
Since you're playing Verdict, doesn't that mean you can finally play Slapfield Workgate and feel good about it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to go full in on Envoy of Divine Progress, or just enchantments in general, Slapfield Workgate definitely makes sense.
Yeah, like you actually have a reliable way of fetching your enchantments now.
Yeah, I did put together a Abzan list with it, as well as condo clearing.
You have it? Yeah, you do. Okay.
Yeah, I started to.
Build that thing up.
And I think that has a lot of solid fetch targets for it.
What's Condor Clearing? It triggers.
That's another card from.
Yeah, triggers enchantment
What's
spells.
that?
Okay, yeah, right. So like, yeah, this is a lot of enchantment synergy.
In more general sets, you can fetch Conspiracy Ravens, because they're more like generically good tutor target. Embodied Soul, another one that really appreciates getting fetched. Also appreciates having stuff fetched for it, so you can upgrade a bit faster. And of course, if you want to go all in on it, like this deck does, probably pretty good. Does admittedly have a bit of an issue where your 2-drop slot is often a bit contested, because that is really when you start to actually add to the board. And Envoy Divine Progress doesn't really do that. It's a much lower slot in general.
Yeah. Also, I find it funny how for Envoys is your only creature suite. Just shows how powerful the card is, or in this sort of deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think it'd be it's more so that you need all your enchantments on deck to play condo clearings and Slapfield Workgate and whatnot. And of course, this isn't to really shouldn't underestimate the protection from Ave too less. A lot of decks just can't kill it, period. And does have a lot of utility blocking like Mark Bruisers, Ragvans, and what have you.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have condo clearings. I guess we can talk about more specifically.
Sure. So
obviously you want enchantments.
Yep, I mean the deck is full of enchantments. But what else we need to know about this card?
Yeah, I think a lot of things that apply to Envoy also apply here, where this works very well with Verdict Council. The birds are white and black, so does get buffed off. Verdict Council gives you a bird. Works really well with Chronicles of the Yatsune, because you get another creature for trying to get up to that combat hour trigger. It's also an anthem, so it's nice on that end as well.
Slapfield Workgate too, right? Because it also makes creatures that can eventually get buffed.
Yeah, general just enchantments that make creatures is what this card wants. Or cares about creatures in some way. And then you got a really pretty powerful ball control trigger, where it's kind of like Paracles in a way, where if you can get this going, it really starts to get overhand. Because edicting creature every turn is pretty substantial, as is getting additional draw every turn with Paracles.
Yeah.
Well, if your opponent can't deal with it by that point, they've probably just you're probably in the clear to start to win the game.
Yeah.
Next card we have is Mayu, the Endless Flow.
Oh boy, this card. So first of all, it's a Llama Serpent.
That's probably the best type line in the format.
Is there any other llamas in the format?
That's a good question.
I think there is. No, there's
no.
Actually, there's llama token.
There's not.
That's the only.
Yeah, there's a card in the set that makes llama token. Yeah.
Is there a llama in canon?
That's a good question.
Apparently not.
No, it's a new card type.
New card type introduced for only one card. Amazing.
So obviously you have the Storm part of this card. Gets +2/+2 for each spell you cast this turn. So this is something that we briefly looked at it for 8-Sac, and I kind of assumed it was good. I think you were a bit.
The problem with playing this card in 8-Sac is that, or at least for me, is that it requires me to do too much thinking. I have to track the swarm count and then try to figure out if doing my combo line would get me to lethal or not. So all I'm saying is that if 8-Sac is going to be forced to play this card, then I'm probably not going to be playing 8-Sac anytime in the future because it's too much thinking for me.
No, really, I feel like you should. You kind of sign up for thinking when you're playing 8-Sac.
Yeah, but at least it doesn't require you to think about what might happen in the future after you've already gone through half your chain.
As suppose so. But I do think that this card is absolutely a pretty valuable win condition in 8-sack type decks. 8-sack in particular, being able to get out really easily with What Looks Beyond. 3 mana is the most common What Looks Beyond kind of mana value with Kaone and whatnot.
8-sack right now. But yeah, so in case you don't know what 8-sack does, because it is a pretty complicated deck, basically you're playing these creatures that when the ETB let you free cast spells. So yeah, you're playing creatures that let you free cast spells on ETB from hand or graveyard, and then you're playing all these artifacts, so you're trying to chain them together in order to cast a massive amount of spells in a turn.
Yeah, so using cards like Kaone and Conjure Realities to free cast cards like free cast Selective Breathing or Lux Beyond, which will hopefully get you more Kaones or 5 Truth Seekers, which then free cast them again from Yard. And you can see how this gets pretty high storm count. And then hopefully at the end of that, you end up with a Mayu in play that is very large.
Yeah.
The deck and this is like, and deck generates enough storm count that stuff like Sure Long Technique is viable, and that requires 6 storm. So getting from 6 to the 7, 8, or 9 you need for Mayu to kill your opponent doesn't seem that unreasonable.
Yeah.
And even just as like a normal card, not going into too much detail around like specific comp decks, I think Mayu is actually pretty reasonable. I mean, even just casting it normally without any storm, it isn't just attacking for 3.
Oh, right, yeah, it counts itself.
So, I mean, it's not super easy to get it up higher than that on the turns ETBing. You can do stuff like Orchestrate with Storm Surge or whatnot, but so you do probably want at least some amount of effort put into spells to put it into play with stuff like Conjure Realities or Kaone or whatnot. But if you do get like even 3 spells where like it's the 3rd spell, then something's hitting for 7, and I mean, if you're on tap with it, it's probably hitting for a similar amount on the following turn.
Yeah, unless you blew all your resources getting this thing into play.
Yeah, in that case, it would be much less sad, or much more sad, really.
Yeah. But like, it's a high risk, high reward option for decks that want to put all of their storm eggs in one basket, I guess, because it does die to removal too, right? The dice instant speed removal.
I mean, kind of. There's not. I mean, it does dodge Pithworld, which is nice. Does dodge much burn. Can't be countered, which is nice. Flying, so it's not being blocked.
And it does get chump blocked by flyers, but you know, that's just life.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think as far as like singular storm recons go, I think this edge is in the nice place between, yeah, your opponent can answer it if they really want to, but chances are they won't have a clean answer to it.
Yeah.
And it's also just kind of easy enough that you don't have to fully combo off for it to be a effective way to dome your opponent in the face.
Yeah.
Then we also have Blood-Sucking Pihuchen.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try at this point.
Okay, so this is another combo card. Or at least I'm looking at it like that. I think the easiest way to explain this is that you go turn 1 0, turn 2 Blood-Sucking, turn 3 Water Guardian, right? And you win.
I see. That does work.
I think that's the kind of paper combo I'm thinking about this deck being involved in. Is in the nice clause for like Persist combo, for example. Not that Persist combo is too common. But I think the real upside of this card is that it just has a very good stat line. Like 2 mana 1/3 Flying Death Touch is pretty hard to fight through. I mean, it always trades. It doesn't die to random removal spells.
Yeah.
You need to spend like a full Pithworld on it. You can't just shock it or anything. It does also have incidental life gain. Can name your opponent's stuff even if there's something weird going on there.
You can stop your opponent's Zera combo.
Yeah. If your opponent has anything that they're playing a ton of, you can name their stuff. Yeah, I think this is just a pretty reasonable card. Just overall, it does definitely need some amount of like broken things going on for it to really be that useful. But I think just the amount of nice things about this card makes it worth considering.
Yeah.
Then we have Kuyen,
the Moon Spirit. So first felt the art looks really trippy.
Pretty much so. So main line of text here is the middle line. You make 2 food, then you can pay through life. If you do surveil 3, then draw 2. That's a lot of value.
That is a lot of value. Why is it at the beginning of each opponent's end step? Feels like a really weird time to trigger.
I think balance wise, I think it works out well. So let's a few places. How do you feel about this in ramp?
Just good in ramp.
Glitch on 3, make 2 food. Then if you're not about to die, draw 2.
Well, the problem is that it needs to survive for a turn cycle because it's at the end of its opponent's end step.
Yeah, but there's not that much that kills it, right? Eat 8, 5 mana.
Just hard removal, I guess.
And if you're playing as a control deck, it's going back in top of the deck.
I guess. Well, third from the top, that's still pretty far away. It's probably gonna get shuffled away because I randomly fetched it, or I randomly forgot and then fetched accidentally.
Yeah, but it's not crazy that you just play an offie and then draw it immediately and play it again.
Yeah. I guess it does do stuff. The problem is that again, it doesn't affect the board that it's both slow and it doesn't affect the board.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect the board, but it affects everything else. It does gain you life and draw you cards.
Right. I think it might be worth trying out if I was in the right colors.
Okay, but then going through another deck, how about in 5-color ramp? So thriving budding type stuff.
What?
So comparison point here might be Glitch or the Granzenberg.
I think it's just worse than those two. Like the Granzenberg is just I think better than QN.
Just for
it's way more immediate.
Board presence.
And it's insane with thriving budding.
And then in decks, 5-color ramp decks playing non-creatures.
Well, then
glitches.
The thing's a creature, so you're already kind of playing not non-creatures.
Yeah, so you have the option to play glitch. But you're saying glitch is probably better than this?
I think it probably is, because glitch draws 2 cards right away, right?
That's true. Glitch also does kill something, or kill face, I guess.
And then it can start making jump blockers too.
This does. 2 food tokens are a lot. If you're not dying the turn that this EDB enters, and this isn't being removed, then you probably win the game, right?
So
is that too much to ask for?
What? So are you saying that you still pay the 3 on the turn that you make this food tokens?
Either you're not dying and paying the 3, or you are dying and you are getting multiple food tokens that you can untap with and crack next turn, and then you get more food tokens the following turn.
I see. Yeah, I think it might work. Then I'm assuming once you've stabilized this guy, it's pretty trivial to get 10 or more cards into the yard and start swinging with it.
Yeah, I would imagine so with the Surveil 3. It's also a reasonably easy thing to tutor out. 5-drop creature, green for Twisted Masterwork.
Yeah, it actually isn't a horrible Twisted Masterwork target. Well, assuming that, if Twisted Masterwork didn't get nerfed, then it would probably be a way better target, because you can Twisted Masterwork it out at the end of your opponent's second main phase and get the end step trigger right away. But now with Twisted Masterwork at sorcery speed, you do have to wait a turn cycle for it to trigger.
Yep. Yeah, but just only that middle trigger does absolutely have the chance to win the game. Move on to, I think, our first Planeswalker.
Yep.
We have Sammy, Kenny Herder.
Hey, there's a llama token that we were talking about.
So, 3-mana walker, +1 makes a token. So, already on a good start. -2, Anthem plus First Strike plus Haste is okay. And then -3 is, what does this card have a name?
Any target. So, Bob. Or no. There has to be a name for it, but I don't know at the moment. Outnumber, I guess. Bear takedown. Those are creature only though, so I'm not sure. But yeah, anyways, ignoring the name.
So that's a really interesting and versatile set of tools. I think even just if you look at it at ignore the -2 and just saying that, oh yeah, this is going to come down 10-3 plus make a blocker, probably not going to die, and then untap, you're going to play some more stuff, and then -3 your opponent's face. That seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, it does. And if you're in the right deck, -3 is probably dealing at least 4, so it's kind of like an Amulet. It's like a delayed Amulet that you have to work for.
Yeah, it comes out full turn sooner.
Well,
so it's much easier to throw in an aggro deck.
Yeah, I think in a red-white swarmy deck, this might actually be pretty good.
I don't think there's too much competition at 3 mana.
Oh, wait, also, since it cares about controlling a llama, not a llama creature, so you can cheat the condition with Polyp Pools.
I suppose you could, yes.
I think it's probably, if you're going to play this card, it might just be worth playing Polyp Pools alongside it, right? Turns your +1 into a constant 1/1 bird instead of having to wait a turn for it.
Yeah, the really Polyp Pool, I think you want to be playing this with 1-drops in general. and Polkals is not great at casting 1-drops, so it's kind of awkward on that front.
Yeah. Is there any changeling in the format so you can cheat the condition?
Not any easy ones that you'd be willing to play.
All right.
I don't think it's that big of a deal if you make a land instead of a bird, because both count to the massively the same.
Right.
I don't think there's too much competition at 3 mana for white-red aggro. I mean, Verdict of the Council is something we mentioned a couple times. South Sound the Dragonblade, maybe, if you have the slots for it. But I think this might just be the kind of most straightforward red-white aggro 3-drop.
Yeah.
Which I think you can always play this, and it's always good.
It's always good, and then if you randomly have some sort of token maker, then suddenly the minus abilities become really great.
Yeah. Moving on to a Planeswalker that is much more over the top. We have Shining Impakwi?
Sure.
Impangui.
Yeah.
Which, this costs 8.
Yeah, so it costs 8, but like ignore that because we're never casting that for 8. Instead, we're going to be casting it with Answer Midnight's Call or Forest Fellowship.
Yeah, so you put this in play, you +2, you grab a Polytheism.
Wait, is this what we're going to be using Polytheism for? Or what were
I mean, I'd say this is kind of overkill, but I mean, Polytheism is a decent cheat target with
like you really
Answers Midnight Call and whatnot.
So assuming you're gonna try to cheat something out on turn 3 or 4, do you have enough targets in yard for Polytheism to be good?
No idea, but I mean, what else are you thinking of fetching with this?
Inexorable Epidemic.
Because ideally, I feel like Epidemic doesn't quite win the game enough.
It like wins the game most of the time that I played against it.
It doesn't, but it gives your opponent a lot of time to recover.
Okay, fine. What about that card that makes everything 1/1s? That thing called.
I mean, that's even more extreme.
Okay.
Because I think what I'm saying with Polytheism is that like it's a good target for Answers Midnight's Call.
Yeah.
Whereas it's definitely not very exciting just going Answers Midnight Call put in a Epidemic. That seems a bit tame for the investment you're making.
What about All Alone? That what's called? Oh wait, no. What's that card that steals creature or what's the curse that steals something every turn?
Nothing left.
What about Nothing Left?
Sure.
It steals your lands.
I mean, if we want to look through like super high end enchantments, like Road to Caru Mapu has a lot of them.
What? Yeah. So what's the biggest, baddest enchantment that you can find that's not Polytheism? And would still be good on its own?
I mean, what? Okay, so you have Pachama, Earth Mother, 10/10 indestructible, Defender indestructible. Lands are 2/2s with haste indestructible. You have the Progenitor Spirit. Whenever you attack, you can cast any number of target cards from your graveyard this turn. And then spells you cast from your graveyard cost 6 less cast. We are into Skyfather, 10/10 enchantments you control have hexproof, including itself, of course. Being combat in your turn, up to 2 target enchantments become Slayer Angels.
Okay. So interesting options, but none of them are good on their own. So, like they're not good to cheat out, right?
Yeah, and this is the kind of concern I have with this card. Where it's like, is this really enough better than like Velia and what's the Sultai one? Chiri and Follow Depths. Because those don't both do a lot of work on their own. I mean, you could also talk about Tyrant Tributes and Azos and.
Yeah, but they're not Planeswalkers. Because apparently you want to play Planeswalkers.
I mean, you can. There's definitely value to playing Planeswalkers, but you need to play another card in your deck for your win condition to win is maybe a bit more than you'd expect.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Pachama is good enough. But I think this is just another one of those cards that you can definitely play, but maybe is just kind of pushed out a bit by the other options.
Right. But maybe in the future, someone prints a really broken enchantment and then suddenly this thing becomes super good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a while on Reanimator, I was playing Geodris, which literally only finds dragons. And it just so happens that the other 2 fetch targets were Tyrant Tributes and Azos, which were dragons. So nothing possible this comes down followed on the road.
Yeah.
Then we have Pyramid Stones,
Pyramid stones. Pyramian stones?
Pyramid?
Yeah, pyramid stones.
Pyramid? Okay. So,
Yeah, so you can clearly look at the card and see what deck the creator of the card was thinking about. Yeah,
I think that might just be you having 8-sack on the brain.
yeah. So this thing first and foremost, it hates really hard on 8-sack because 8-sack casts spells from the graveyard and casts spells without paying their mana cost a bunch of times the same turn. But actually, if I free cast a spell from a yard, does this only trigger once?
Yes.
Okay. So what I get if I'm at 20 life, I get 3 free casts or I die.
Yep. Is this good? So I would kind of question whether this is effective sideboard hate against other decks. I don't think it is, right? I mean, I guess it kind of hates on aristocrats
It,
because they cast a bunch of stuff from
I mean,
graveyards.
it hates on Cane Dancers at least.
Yeah, but I mean, if your opponent's playing King Dancer as the only way to get stuff back, and I'm like,
But
cool.
okay, so they're playing Cane Dance. They're playing both Cane Dancers, as well as a bunch of spells that second time for free, like Omnis Discovery. If it
Okay.
triggers off Omnis Discovery, it triggers off a planet far, far away.
Okay. So if it be sold that you have decks playing 8 cards that this hits, is that enough?
Probably not, but like at least you're sending a message. That's the thing. You're telling them
I
that
see.
you do not appreciate cards being free cast on the second time around.
Yeah, back in your day, you paid the mana cost for your spells, and the graveyard wasn't a second hand; it was the graveyard.
Wait, is this good against Big Red? Like they also have a bunch of stuff that free casts or casts from yard, right? Emissary of Antiquities, that thing screws over.
I mean, they could just like not free cast of FSA.
Well, but then they're losing half the value of Emissary.
Well, they made up a lot of value off MSA because you just put pyramid stones into play.
Okay, but then it also triggers them off flashing back the Flames approach. And that's
Yeah, the Flames approach has gotten a lot of value from you putting pyramid stones into play.
okay, and it hits Coalesce, so like it hits we call Forgotten Aeons.
Yeah, but they've already played the front half of Recalcitrant Aeons, and you have a pyramid stones.
Maybe there's some way to force your opponent to cast stuff without paying their mana costs. But is there a card that has a
Well, let me
downside
know
where
when
it
you.
makes your opponent cast stuff for free? Is there
I don't
is
think
there a
so.
Millhouse Maelstrom in MSEM?
Probably. I don't think so. Would be maybe an interesting design. But moving on to
Fine.
last card of the set that we're looking at, we have Llama Pasture, which makes llamas.
Hey, it's the other thing that makes llama tokens. I mean, is there anything else that we want to say about this card other than it makes llamas?
I mean, that's what the other card does, right? Is it makes llamas?
Well, it makes llamas with a condition. You need 0 or enchantments, then you have to pay mana. You make a 1/0/1.
Yeah, I think this. So you always have to be careful about lands that do like extra stuff because, like, I think we know how good like man lands are just because everyone's been hit with man lands 3 or 4 times at the end of the game to kill and lost because of it.
Yeah.
And like, of course, you have stuff like Elratha, Mirgate, Quartz Bed, all these other utility lands in MSEM. And some of them makes tokens at a relatively cheap rate. It's not free, but as far as like land abilities go, it's pretty budget.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely something to look at.
I mean,
It-
wait, does MSEM not have any easy token making lands? Like, do they not have a castle? What's that a card from Canada that makes feature tokens on the land that makes feature tokens?
Castle Ardenvale.
Yeah, does
or
MSEM not
something?
have an analog to Castle Ardenvale format yet?
I think the first thing is Solely Citadel,
Huh.
which is arguably just kind of better. It is 3 times the cost to make a single token, but it is instant speed. Doesn't have the enchantment condition.
Yeah.
So more people should play Solely Citadel. It's a good card.
It's a colorless land. You
Um,
can't afford to play that many colorless lands in your decks, right?
yeah, but well, I mean, you can and can't because you can't cut a color band for it most of the time. But you can do is cut a spell for it.
Right.
The same thing comes up with like Mono Queens, where it's like, well, okay, you have 25 lands in your control deck, and you don't have Mono Queens in, and you don't really want to cut my land because you're playing all these like,
You're playing 5 colors.
dang, whatever. You're playing heavy mana cost or color cost spells. Well, why not just play 26 lands and Mono Queens?
Right.
Because I mean, your control deck, you want that extra land anyways.
So for Llama Pasture, are you also going to be doing the same thing?
I mean, sure. There's definitely a question of whether you have the kind of even afford color sources at all, because control decks obviously have clues and stuff. Whereas with Llama Pasture, it's like, well, I mean, I guess you could play this in control. It's not crazy to do so.
You play it in a enchantment heavy control deck.
You play with Juyu pools, or something along those lines. Maybe that works out. I mean, it just makes a chum blocker every turn.
Yeah, that has to be extremely annoying for an opponent.
Yeah, they're like, wow, I've killed 7 llamas so far. um, so in that respect, it's probably decent. And of course, there's not that much of a cost. There's not like an extreme cost to it. I mean, Colorless Mana isn't great, but a lot of decks can afford to play Colorless Mana. It's a little bit. Though admittedly, people do like to just randomly play 3 colors.
Yeah.
So I think if you can afford to play this and you're playing like 12 enchantments, it's probably not unreasonable to just say, oh yeah, I'm playing this card. It's going to make me some tokens, and those tokens are potentially pretty valuable.
Yeah. This doesn't go in the same deck that you showed previously with Condor Clearings, right? Because that one's way too fast to benefit from Llama Pasture.
Yeah, I think in more particular, there I think basically no cards in the deck can actually use the colorless mana.
Right.
Because it doesn't cost Envoy, it doesn't cost Condor Clearings, it doesn't cast Chronicles or Conspiracy Ravens. It doesn't cost a lot. It doesn't cast. I think it doesn't cast most of the deck.
Yeah.
That is an example of the deck that, if you did have some extra colors costs, could absolutely play this card, because it is pretty ban hungry. It is already on 24 lands, despite only playing despite topping out at 3 drops. I think that's enough on Llama Pasture and enough on, and that concludes our review of Road to Caru Mapu in general.
Yep. So I mean, an interesting set. There's nothing super strong there's nothing that jumps out at me as super strong, which is probably a good thing for getting the set into the format. The roads still all feel kind of weak to me, but that's probably just because I'm undervaluing the cantrip too much.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the roads are generally not exceptionally strong. There are only 12 of them, but I don't think they're like. I think the cantripping does make them a lot more viable if you do want to try something out with them. I mean, there's a lot that we didn't mention that could be built around.
Yeah.
Like Worship the Sun is a decent alternate win condition. Valley's Majesty works really well to mitigate. Return to the Home Plane has a whole bunch of random combos that goes nuts with. Off the Heart, depending on what you're doing, is pretty nasty. Path through the Plains, another cheat target. Even stuff like Empire's Glory, on War. There's just a lot of stuff that, like, yeah, them drawing a card makes them much more appealing if you already want what they're doing. But as far as actually building a deck around what the effect is, yeah, they're not exceptional at doing that, because I think a lot of the value is in the draw card. But I definitely do agree that there's not too much in the set that like you should just jam into your deck that you already have. I think most of the cards that are kind of like that, there isn't a deck for them yet. I mean, we're pretty high on Sammy, Kenny Herda, and well, White Red Aggro isn't really that big of a thing, if it is a thing at all. Milry and Chilanka, another one of those cards that, well, green red pressure isn't really a deck. Chatsky Veteran, same kind of deal. Even something like Intercede is a masterpiece. Robots is not really that common deck, at least if any attempts at it aren't blue.
Yeah. But with that, I think we've talked long enough about the set, so we'll conclude our set review right here.